Good morning, everyone, and welcome to Ohio EPA's webinar, Open Burning, Odors, Dust, and Asbestos and Demolition in Your Community Presentation. Our In Your Community webinar series focuses on environmental issues at the local level, covering a wide range of topics from how Ohio EPA regulates pollution sources to ways on improving the environment in your local area. My name's Helen Miller with the Division of Environmental and Financial Assistance here at Ohio EPA, and I will be moderating this morning's presentation with Ohio EPA's John Pollyan and Jeff Gerdes. With that, I'm going to turn it over to Ohio EPA's John Pollyan and Jeff Gerdes.
Good morning. My name is John Pollyan with the Ohio EPA Central Office, Division of Air Pollution Control. I am the supervisor of the Compliance Monitoring Unit. And this morning we will talk about open burning, odors, dust, and asbestos, as well as nuisance odors as well. And we'll also give you the contacts you'll need if you have any questions or need assistance from our districts or local offices. And let's start this with a live poll. Question is, does your agency receive requests from the public to open burn? Yes or no? So it looks like about half of you do receive these. And it's important to note that when you do receive these requests, that at minimum is to follow Ohio EPA rules, although some cities or locals do have more stringent open burning requirements. Open burning is allowed by the rule for a number of different things, specifically spelled out in the rule. Bonfires, campfires, outdoor fireplaces, but you do need to burn only clean seasoned wood, and it can't be any bigger than 3 foot by 2 foot. If it's any bigger, you're going to have to notify Ohio EPA. You can burn landscape waste outside of city limits, but you also need to keep it away from neighbors, things like that. Land clearing waste that's generated on the site, like if you're cleaning up a farm area, something like that, is allowed, but it requires permission, and it has to be in what we call an unrestricted area outside the city limits. Agricultural waste has to be at least 1,000 feet from inhabited buildings, and there are other requirements that also require notification, which is spelled out in the rule, notification to Ohio EPA. Another thing that is allowed is recognized horticultural, silvicultural, forestry, range management, prairie grassland, invasive species management, or wildlife management practices, again requires notification. And what that means is you'll see prescribed burns that they want to burn off an unwanted species or one that should be eliminated to allow like the forest to grow better, or to get some of the prairie management, some of the things that they don't want in there, they'll burn down and then it'll come back in better. So that's the wildlife management practices. Firefighter training is also allowed. That includes burning a house that's been donated, although there are restrictions on that, and firefighter training always requires permission. And this can also include, the kind of parking lot training, with hay bales, things like that. But you will have to request permission from the agency. And there are other extraordinary circumstances that burning can be allowed for. And again, that's spelled out in the rule, and again requires permission. And that includes like explosives or drugs, things like that. Violations. The most common that we see is inappropriate waste, and we've seen everything that people have tried to burn, from boats to houses to sheds to you name it. Trailers is another good one. Also, though, that can include, even in a small fire, plastics, wire, tires, things like that. Those cannot be burned. The other we find is if you were allowed to burn, but you're within 1,000 feet of an inhabited structure, and 1,000 feet is a pretty long distance. So when you look at that, consider that before you think about burning or allowing burning. And I have a link here that will take you to the contacts for open burning in each county, as well as giving a lot more background on the program. And there's a good example of what we see. You can see a drum in there, fairly large fire. And this is the kind of thing we're talking about, building materials. Somebody cleans out a house and burns it. And you can see a variety of things in here, all of which are illegal. And there's another one where you can see the packing straps and what else we have. Looks like building material primarily. Again, clean seasoned firewood for any kind of bonfire or campfire. And now I will turn this over to Jeff Curtis of our asbestos group, and he can explain the asbestos rules.
All right. Well, good morning and welcome, everyone. I am Jeff Curtis, the supervisor of the asbestos program here in the Division of Air Pollution Control at the Ohio EPA Central Office. Today, we're going to talk a little bit about some of Ohio EPA's asbestos and demolition regulations. We're going to get into several different things from, notifications, emergency notifications, a little bit of rule requirements, building inspections. So I guess we'll go ahead and get started here. All right, prior to 2018, there were two different asbestos programs located at two different state agencies. I guess this is a little bit old news now, but previously, one rule set was at the Ohio Department of Health, and those were the licensing and certification rules. And the other set of rules were the emission control rules, and those were located at the Ohio EPA. Then in 2018, there was a law change that went into effect, and those programs merged, and the Ohio Department of Health rules were moved under the Ohio EPA. So we're all, one big happy family now. And so the two rule sets is Ohio Administrative Code 3745-20. Those were the original Ohio EPA rules. Those are the emission control rules. And then the other ones that came over from the Department of Health, they cover asbestos certification, licensing, contractor licensing, training approvals, and that is under Ohio Administrative Code 3745-22. We get into certifying individuals such as workers, supervisors, project designers, inspector, management planners, air monitoring technicians. We also license abatement contractors and approved training providers. We get notifications on abatement and demolition projects out there. So, and we also perform inspections on all of those different things as well to ensure compliance and whatnot. So, Ohio EPA's asbestos and demolition rules will apply when a demolition, renovation, or abatement is happening in a regulated facility. Demolition is defined as remove or wreck any load-supporting structural members or related operation. This also includes burning. So if you do any fire training, that will fall under the demolition rules. So, and a renovation is altering the facility in any other way, including removing asbestos. All right, let's get into some of our obligations and who's required to follow these obligations. So Ohio EPA talks about owners and operators. They both have obligations in this process. Once you decide if you're going to perform a demolition or renovation activity, the first thing you're going to need to do is have an asbestos and building inspection done. This will identify any potential asbestos-containing materials, and it will help you determine what you need to do prior to that renovation or demolition activity occurring. You're also required to submit a notification to the Ohio EPA at least 10 working days prior to the start of the demolition or abatement project. So those working days are counted as Monday through Friday. Day one counts as the day that is submitted. So if there's a postmark date on there, that will count as day one. Or if you submit it electronically, that notification, the day you submit it electronically to us through our website, will also count as start the clock as day one. There's specific work practices that are required to be followed. Asbestos waste requirements, some of those work practices, adequately wetting the material, properly labeling, containerization of the material, and disposal of the materials in an Ohio EPA approved waste disposal site. All this work requires specialized training and Ohio EPA certification and licensing. So there's a lot that goes into that for these individuals doing this work. All right, it's poll time. The question, do you have a funded demolition program run by your agency that handles abandoned or blighted properties? Yes or no? Well, there's not too many programs, agencies on this that handle, have funding for abandoned or blighted properties. That was a little different than I was expecting. So that's good. Maybe a lot of the people on this call will find some useful information in this presentation. That was a little unexpected, I guess. So, all right, well, we'll keep going here. And I'm seeing a few questions come in as well on the chat, and hopefully we'll get some of those answered throughout the presentation. And if they're not answered, we will get you an answer to that question as well. So. All right, asbestos notifications. When are you required to submit a notification? For all demolitions. There are a few exceptions for some single-family residential homes with 4 units or less, but there are requirements that must be met for it to qualify for that exemption. You should reach out to one of our offices, whether it's our district office or our local area agency or our central office, if you have any questions about if your property is residentially exempt or not. And so during renovations, notifications are also required for renovations when you're removing greater than 50 linear or 50 square feet of friable asbestos. That will trigger the licensing and certification rules. Then when you remove at least 260 linear feet or 160 square feet or 35 cubic feet of regulated asbestos containing material, that will trigger the emission control rules. So there's 2 different sets of rules. Both have different thresholds there for abatement purposes. So you just think of it as more than 50 feet, then the rules for notification and licensed contractor are going to apply. We do have the ability to do an emergency notification which waives some of the requirements, such as the building inspection, any required abatement, and the 10 working day wait period. We're going to talk a little bit more about that here in a minute. We also have an online system where these notifications can be submitted. That is our preferred method. It's located on our website. It's called the e-Business Center. You will have to go in there and set up an account. First, you'll have to log in through and create an account in what they call a OHID. That's a portal there. It's kind of a single sign-on. Once you get that account created, you can link into the Ohio EPA e-Business Center at that point, and you'll be able to get all set up to create and submit notifications. What info is needed on a notification? A lot of things go into the notifications. As I said before, they need to be submitted at least 10 working days prior to the start of the work. And that does count Monday through Friday as working days, and the postmarked date or submitted date counts as day one. So you can actually start, you got to wait the full 10 days, then you can start on the 11th day. That's how that works. So project specific information is also included on the notification, such as start dates, end dates of the project, the landfill being used to dispose of the debris, both the demolition and abatement contractors involved in the project, types of asbestos that are being removed, RACM, regulated asbestos-containing material, category 1 or category 2 materials. There's all places to list all that. There's also some sections in there for emergency demolitions or emergency renovations or abatements. There's also fees associated with the notifications. $65 for the licensing and certification rules. And then there's a $75 NESHAP emission rule fee. And then there are fees that are associated and based on the amounts of asbestos or RACM that is removed from the site. So it comes out to it's about $3 per unit removed or $4 per cubic yard for an all RACM cleanup. So from a local government perspective, these notifications are important. It helps give us the ability to ensure the demolition or asbestos abatement work will not cause health threats to your citizens and your communities, such as schools, local businesses, housing developments, hospitals. All right, let's talk a little bit about some of residential stuff. All right. I just want to mention a few things here relating to residential structures. Residential structures with 4 or fewer units can be exempt from the Ohio Administrative Code 3745-20 emission control rules in some cases. There is the exception for that exemption is unless if they are part of an installation or ever used as a business. So if that house was used as a business, or if it's part of that installation, they are no longer exempt from that rule. They will fully apply to the rule. So it will be regulated by the Ohio EPA. So an installation basically is a group of buildings or structures when there's more than one residential house part of a city or land bank project is a good example. So many cities tear down or renovate several, they have funding and they renovate several houses on a yearly basis. So they do more than one. So that becomes part of all those residential properties become part of an installation. The land banks do the same things. If you have a developer that comes in and want to take out 2 or 3 houses, neighboring houses because of a building, a new business is going to be put up, for example, those would be part of an installation as well, more than one, so they do fully apply to the rule. So we get questions from homeowners fairly often asking if they can perform asbestos abatement in their own home. If a homeowner is performing the work in their own home themselves, then they are exempt from the rules. We try not to regulate the homeowner doing work in their own home, but when they go to hire somebody, they hire an outside contractor. Now there's a potential, there's potential requirements there for those individuals to be certified and licensed. We'll talk a little bit more about that here in a few minutes. Emergency demolitions, they can be caused by fire, water damage, an old abandoned building for years that has, weathered and is now falling in, leads to wood rot, structural collapse. One of the things you will need for this, a couple of things you'll need for this, is a written order from a local or state government official explaining that the structure is structurally unsound and in danger of imminent collapse. We'll talk a little bit more about this and get into this one here in a minute as well. The other thing I want to add here is that that's not on this slide, that is if the structure is used for fire training for the local fire department, all of the asbestos is required to be removed prior to the burn, and Ohio EPA notification is required. All right, a few common mistakes that we see relating to demolitions and abatement. Not getting a thorough building inspection done prior to the renovation or demolition activity. This is always going to cause a lot of headaches and cause a lot more money to get those things cleaned up in those situations. So it's very important to have that building inspection done prior to that renovation or demolition activity. You wait too long to send in the notification, or for example, you start work before the 10-day work waiting period is met. That can cause some problems on our end as well. It's very important to make sure you meet those timelines and wait those days before that project starts. And not defining your contractor's responsibilities in your contracts. Make sure you have contracts with these contractors. It prevents a lot of issues down the road, and it spells out exactly what is expected from your contractors. We see a lot of things go wrong with handshake deals, so and it ends up costing everybody a lot of headaches and money in the long run. So do your research on your contractors, check the references, check their certifications. All the individuals working on an asbestos abatement site will have a certification card issued by the Ohio EPA. The company will be a licensed abatement contractor. They will have a certificate issued by us as well. So get multiple bids on these projects. We see a lot of variation in estimates from contractors depending on the time of year that the work is occurring, depending on how, there's many factors, depending on if one contractor is more busy than the other. So they may, if one really has a lot of work going on right now and he doesn't need that work, they may throw out a high number for you. So get multiple bids. We always recommend 3 to 5. Not updating the original notification when the project changes. Make sure any changes during the project that differs from what was originally submitted on that notification, the owner operator would be required to submit a revision updating those changes as soon as possible, but no later than the following workday. So for example, a date would change, or the project ends early, for example, and a week early, they need to revise that notification to let us know that that work is done. demolition of a structure prior to abatement. This is kind of a big one. We've been seeing a lot of these illegal kind of demolitions going on lately. It's a big, kind of a big problem trend, and it's causing a lot of extra work, a lot of extra money on the owner's parts, can result in increased project costs, including now treating all the debris as RACM instead of just having the asbestos removed originally properly. Now the entire building, the entire structure is all going to be considered regulated. And then, you know, you're always subject to possible penalties as well with something when that occurs that way. And it always can cause unwanted attention from the press and the public, and none of us want to have to deal with that. So I just wanted to add to just be aware that many local building departments issued demolition permits. This does not count as the notification to the Ohio EPA. So those are separate. So just make sure that your contractors are aware of that they still need to notify the Ohio EPA. Also be aware of unusually low bids. That can be a sign that there may be a problem there. Those can always, you know, start the blame game and end up costing all involved when things go wrong. If you get a low bid, possibly, maybe they're cutting corners, maybe they're not, but just be aware. All right, emergency demolitions. They're sometimes needed when a structure is unsafe or structurally unsound and in danger of collapse. So we sent out a guidance document last year covering the notification process for emergency demolitions. If you have not seen this yet, I highly recommend you reach out to one of our offices to obtain a copy. It's also located on our asbestos website under our project notifications tile on there. So it is a very useful and helpful document. It will help you get through the entire process of an emergency demolition. So take a look at that. Emergency demolitions occur when one cannot perform a building inspection or required asbestos abatement due to safety issues. They can waive the 10-day wait requirement. They also can require an emergency demolition and renovation abatement notification, which includes treating all the debris as RACM, or regulated asbestos containing material. So everything has to be treated as regulated, the entire structure, all the debris. There will also require the use of in addition to the demolition contractor, it will also require the use of a licensed asbestos abatement contractor. On site, they will ensure that, you know, all the debris is being handled properly. And that all important emergency demolition order letter that's issued by that government official as well that's ordering that demolition. That usually includes a code, a local ordinance or citation code that gives that building official the authority to issue that, to order that demolition because the structure is unsafe. All right. A little bit on our licensing rules. We updated just about a year ago. The Ohio EPA updated and revised the licensing and certification rules. That's Ohio Administrative Code 374522. This included some definition changes, a few exemptions, and corrected some language inconsistencies with our two rule sets resulting back from the merger in 2018. A few definitions that were changed, the big ones that were changed throughout the rules were abatement activity and abatement project. Abatement activity now includes removal of greater than 3 linear or 3 square feet of friable asbestos containing material. This one is kind of the big one that affects some out there. It's now going to require certified individuals to perform removal, repair, enclosure, encapsulation, operation, and maintenance of more than 3 feet of friable asbestos. Previously, you did not have to be certified to remove any friable asbestos up until the greater than 50 feet of friable asbestos. So now it's at 3 feet. Anything greater than 3 feet, individuals have to be certified. That this does not include contractor licensing yet or notification yet. So that's what we're going to get to next, which falls under abatement project. This term is basically the same as what we used to call an abatement activity before the rule change. An abatement project now includes removal of greater than 50 linear or 50 square feet of friable asbestos containing material. This is the threshold that will require prior notification of a licensed asbestos contractor. We excluded removal. So a couple of exclusions here that I wanted to hit on. This one's a little tricky, I guess. So in the 20 rule set, the emission control rules, there is the residential exemption that I talked about. If it meets, so under an abatement activity, we talk about removal of more than 3 feet of friable material. When that happens, in the wording under the definition of removal talked about removal from the site. So if you remove from a site more than 3 feet of friable asbestos, then you are subject to the licensing and certification rules. However, if that project is exempt, if that is a residential structure that meets the exemption requirements under the emission control rules, then the removal of that demolition debris from that site is now exempt from the licensing and certification rule as well. So we kind of cleaned that up a little bit. If it's exempt from the one rule, we were going to exempt it from the licensing rule as well. So now that does not include any abatement activity. If you're going to perform abatement and remove friable asbestos, the rule still applies to that. That's only when you remove that debris that is exempt under the 20 rule, removing that debris from a site. So if you perform an abatement activity, say you're going to remove 200 linear feet of pipe insulation from a residential house, prior to demolition, the rule still applies. The licensing rule will still apply to that. So, all right. The last thing I want to mention about the rule change, it exempted removal and repair of pipeline, asphaltic pipe wrap, roof flashings, build-up roofing. You still have, if you follow and are in compliance with the OSHA requirements and the US EPA requirements there, that does not exempt you from our emission control rules, just from the licensing and certification requirements. So there's less training if you follow the proper work practices. So our certifications would not be required to do that type of work. So you can always visit our website for all of our rules as well. We have those all on there. All right, a few photos here. We're kind of winding down. This is one that just kind of shows what happens if you do not remove the asbestos prior to the demolition activity. Everything ends up being commingled on a job site. Now it's all going to result in treating it all as regulated asbestos material, and everything goes out that way and is properly packaged, containerized, labeled, sent to an approved waste disposal site. So ends up being a big costly mess to clean it up this way. So And here's another good example. This one was a huge one. The demo contractor came in and knocked several very large buildings down. There's just a lot of acre after acres here of building debris in place that does contain asbestos. They even had to go to as far as they had to hire a water truck to drive around and spray the piles of debris to keep them wet. It is a good example of keeping it wet as well. That the powerhouse there in the background, the demo contractor actually cut some of several of the steel support beams, made that structure very unstable. There was a lot of very friable asbestos in that building that sat for years there, exposed to the weather. So before that finally got demolished, it was not safe to go into that building and do removal. So they had to end up demolishing it all in place and treating it as Rackham. So and here's just one of an ongoing demolition. And then this one is just a good example of keeping the debris wet during the demolition. You can see they're demolishing a facility of some sort here, and all the debris is being kept very wet. So, which is what we want to see. So, and that is it for me. That wraps things up from the asbestos part of the presentation. Thanks for having me. And if you have any further questions, please feel free to send us a message or reach out to one of our offices. John, I guess it's back to you.
Thank you, Jeff. And the next section we are going to cover are air pollution nuisances. And this is the rural definition of what is considered to be a nuisance. And it's pretty much the emission or escape into the open air from any sources, whatever, smoke, ash, dust, grime, fumes, gases, vapors, or any combination thereof that causes in such amounts that endangers health or welfare of the public or causes unreasonable injury or damage to property. And that can include material that's coming off a facility that's settling on cars nearby, staining houses, smoke that is making it hard to live in a house or is causing a nuisance like in roadways, things like that. It can be any number of things. And let's go to another poll. Does your locality have any rules regarding nuisance abatement? Yes or no? And it looks like pretty much what I expected, that many localities have odor nuisance rules, probably in some cases more stringent than what Ohio EPA has. So this doesn't surprise me. And a lot of times you can get more effective enforcement locally because you've got local courts or even somebody at the health department that handles nothing but nuisances. Again, to go back on nuisances a little bit too, it does not have to be a facility causing that. It can be private individuals as well as facilities. Odor nuisances are one of our trickier ones to try to enforce. A lot of facilities do have an odor to them. There are other operations. In the spring, you'll get wet mulch that smells terrible, but it's not a nuisance in that case because it's not regulated by us specifically. As you can see, odor nuisances, we are limited to material, emissions that are regulated under our rules, and that includes particulate, sulfur dioxide, carbon monoxide, photochemically reactive organic materials, hydrocarbons. And it has to be something that's being operated in a manner that causes amounts of odor as to endanger the health, safety, or welfare of the public, or cause, again, unreasonable injury. And it's very subjective at times. You know, what smells bad to one person, you know, they can't stand it. Other people aren't bothered by. Our inspectors will go out and do investigations whenever we get an odor complaint, and we'll sometimes do an odor survey with the residents around the area if it's persistent enough or significant enough. We'll also make an attempt to track back if it's a facility, what facility might be emitting the odors and what their operations were that day, to see if there was a problem with the operation or a malfunction, something like that. Again, though, these are difficult to deal with, but we will investigate them, and we've had a number of cases over the years of getting operations changed to reduce the amount of odor coming out of them. And let's talk about dust. Another one we get quite a few complaints about. We have specific rules right here in Ohio, Administrative Code 3745-17. Fugitive are regulated in certain parts of the state, such as the more populated areas and counties and cities. They're in what's called Appendix A and B, or Appendix A category. In general, the requirements are to minimize visible dust, minimize it or eliminate it. This goes for facility operations primarily, and that requires the use of water or certain chemicals that will suppress the dust. Again, with operations, common sense practices: don't use air lamps or compressed air to clean up dust. Use water, covers for trucks, wheel washes to avoid drag out into the street, using capture systems around, like drop points, things like that, to minimize the fugitive dust. There, again, like odor, there is a certain amount of capacity, a certain amount of dust allowed from operations, but it's specified in their permit or by rule. And there's an example of not getting good capture. This is probably a bag house here, and obviously it has some leaks, and that wouldn't be acceptable. And this looks to be an operation at a landfill, and again, this dust being thrown up that should be watered or suppressed. And at a asphalt or cement plant, when they're loading, unloading, or trucks are moving around, this should be watered. The roadway should be, or more control exercised when they're doing that kind of operation. Construction, working on roadways. Again, when they're sawing, they should also be wetting at the same time or capturing the dust. I've seen that done both ways. And this, again, is causing a nuisance in that it's obscuring the view for traffic across the street. That makes that more difficult for them. Dirt roadways, however, this is a public road. That is not regulated by us. That's allowed, although, again, you will see tar or something like that put down on some of these roadways to minimize dust. That is not something that we have in our regulations. And this picture is rather interesting in that just down the street, in the background there is our office building downtown, and they were doing street work here and doing cutting without wetting, and there was dust generated by this. Needless to say, we went down to look at it. There's right in that same area, and you can see the drag out on the road is causing dust to be thrown up there. And again, another picture of a construction or operation there that this should be wetted. They should not have dust like this visible. And that, I believe, is a landfill. Same sort of thing. Operations that should have wetting or some sort of dust suppressant there. Things to remember, again, cities and facilities all have some odor and dust. You'll never get rid of all of it. We do get involved when you observe a business or, like construction activity that's generating excessive dust or causing, something that's causing a strong odor. But again, just because you smell something doesn't mean it's causing harm. Again, like I said, mulching, wastewater facilities will have some smell, but they aren't necessarily harmful and causing an issue. And as I said earlier, each office has contact for open burning, asbestos complaints. I've put a link to the map that you can use and a list of contacts for some of these that will allow you to find the correct person, correct district office or local to talk to. And again, the Ohio EPA website has a lot of resources. And again, when in doubt, call us. We'll always answer your question, and it's better to find out before you start something that you may have additional requirements or could have problems with it. And we'll turn this back over to you, Helen.
Okay, thank you, John and Jeff. We're going to begin answering the questions now. We got a lot of great questions in. We're not going to be able to get to all of them, but we will get you email follow-up after the webinar if we don't answer your question. So the first question is what can I do if I can't perform a building inspection or any asbestos abatement project prior to demolition because the property is in danger of that imminent collapse? Jeff, do you want to take that one?
Yeah, thanks, Helen. So we did talk a little bit about this one. I'll kind of summarize it here again as well. So the first thing is you have to submit an emergency demolition and abatement notification. So both would be required in this situation. You need to submit that as early as possible to the Ohio EPA before the work begins, but no later than the following working day after the demolition has started. So the idea is we don't, if it's that bad of a situation, the paperwork can come second. The intent is get the emergency handled first, today, and then the paperwork can follow at the latest tomorrow. So make it safe first. That's the kind of intent behind that. So as part of that emergency notification submission, there should be an emergency demolition order letter issued from that government authority that is ordering the demolition due to that structure being unsound and in danger of imminent collapse. All of that demolition debris is going to be handled and treated as regulated asbestos-containing material. A licensed abatement contractor is going to be required to be on site to set up that regulated work area, ensure that the materials are being adequately wet, and proper packaging, labeling, and disposal of all the waste to an Ohio EPA approved waste disposal site. That's it.
Okay, we'll do one more question because we are needing to wrap up here in light of time. It's the can a fire department burn a house for training purposes? And I think John and Jeff, both of you kind of covered some of this.
Yeah, that's correct. But both programs are affected by that. Yes, a fire department can burn a house for fire training. It does require permission from the agency. And there are certain restrictions on that, including weather conditions are right that doesn't cause smoke to go across roadways or cause other issues. You also have to remove some things from the house, typically siding or any kind of plastics, the furniture, obviously, things like that. There is also an asbestos component to that as well. And that's where you can take that, Jeff, because I believe this requires a demolition notification.
That's right. Thanks, John. So from the asbestos side of things, there's going to be a few things that need to happen before the training can occur. The structure that is used for the fire training will be subject to our demolition and abatement rules, no matter what, whether it's a single family residential home or a larger facility structure related business. First, the building inspection must occur to identify any asbestos containing materials. Then a training, fire training, demolition notification, and abatement notification must be submitted. So if there's any asbestos identified, they have to submit that abatement notification. They're required to remove all of the asbestos containing materials identified before that burn can happen. And both of these notifications will again, it's the same process. We'll have to meet that 10 working day wait period before that starts work. And just the big key in all this is that, yes, all of the asbestos has to be removed prior to a burn for fire training. And that's all I've got.
Okay, great. Well, thank you both, John and Jeff, for your great presentations. Like I said, lots of questions. We'll get you those questions so you can follow up. So everyone will get a follow-up via email if you ask a question. Thank you to our behind-the-scenes team today also in helping our webinar run smoothly. Before we end, please check out our upcoming sessions. February 24th, we have Preparing a Stormwater Pollution Prevention Plan. Do you need to develop a SWIP to comply with an NPDES industrial stormwater permit? Learn the elements of the SWIP and mistakes to avoid. And then as part of BWC's Ohio Safety Congress in March, we'll be hosting 4 environmental sessions. You'll be provided an overview of Ohio EPA's major program areas and learn strategies to comply with regulations. You'll be provided an in-depth look at your hazardous waste and air pollution control requirements. You'll hear from 3 senior inspectors from our air, wastewater, and hazardous waste programs on what to expect during an inspection. And then with spring around the corner, you might have construction activities planned, so check out the session on the construction stormwater. If you missed past webinars or would like to register for upcoming webinars, check out our new Ohio EPA website. There's the link there for our Media Center events. This is our new agency event calendar, and you can register for our upcoming DEFA webinars here. The events link is also at the bottom of each of our web pages if you scroll to the very bottom. Click on events. You can also go to our DEFA web page to register for upcoming training, and that link is there. When you get to our web page, look at the left menu, and you'll see the word training. Click there. That will take you to upcoming webinars you can register for. You can look at past webinars we've held. It'll take you to recordings of past webinars. Also, we post the recordings for our webinars on our agency YouTube channel. That's another way you can access them. We usually get them up within a week of the webinar. And we also post a PDF copy of the PowerPoint presentation along with that recording on the YouTube channel. To receive notifications of upcoming webinars, you can go to our Ohio EPA Customer Support Center and create an account and go to subscribe to updates. You can go to that web link, or at the bottom of each web page, there's a link to the Customer Support Center there as well. With that, we'll end today's webinar. Again, thank you for joining us and have a great day.